Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. Hungarian Prime Minister Peter Magyar has called for the immediate resignation of Supreme Court President András Varga, accusing him of overseeing lavish, publicly funded renovations symbolizing entrenched Orbán-era privilege. Now, the dispute comes just weeks into Magyar's premiership as Hungary navigates a politically charged transition while its economy remains in a challenging situation. We discuss the latest with Raffaella Tenconi, Economist, Wood & Company. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Good morning.
So we talked about Hungary a lot these past weeks. There's high expectations. I just want to get your sense as well from your experience in the economy. There's much expected of a reset, of a transition. How realistic and how fast can that economic transition take place?
Oh, that is a big question. Well, let's start from the beginning. The government certainly is going to reset relationship with the EU. In order to do that, it has to meet the 27 super milestones that were originally agreed for the Recovery and Resilience Fund program. So that takes care of significant changes in the rule of law agenda, including improving prosecution, which is a major bottleneck for Hungary. So I would say in terms of one major institutional change, that is very likely, and it's coming within months. Second thing that I think is important for the country, if you look at the cabinet appointment, you can see that healthcare and education have been strengthened. There is a commitment to improve them. That is important from an institutional long-term growth perspective. It also is important for the voters. So it kind of has a virtuous effect also on the effectiveness and the support of the cabinet. In terms of a broader growth mix, so to speak, I think that is significantly more of a medium-term agenda, and we'll need to see how effective the cabinet will be. But I think there is credit where credit needs to be done. There will be steps forward that are meaningful taken already within the first year.
And what, in your mind, would be some of those indicators in terms of where success or change can be seen? I mean, we're looking at, for instance, VAT. It's 27%, one of the highest in Europe, if not the highest in Europe. But also in terms of production, looking at sort of factors of this way, where do you see some glimmer? I know it's early days, but where would those first, let's say, positive signs appear economically?
Well, there is some very positive sign in the April data, which was the month of the election, where you can see both households' inflation expectations were very stable compared with everywhere else in the Eurozone, and industrial production, generally business confidence was up. We don't really know if that was just luck or was really already the change of the mandate. We'll need to wait for the May data to show up. But definitely, I expect that in the business confidence segment, so to speak, you should see improvement, because we know that EU funds, we can discuss how big the inflow will be, but definitely there will be more EU funds coming in Hungary going forward. Now, you have to be careful because Hungary is a major car exporter, and the production of cars is being not really in line with where the demand for cars has been in the last few quarters, but there is an improvement coming through. So the economy should improve anyway, regardless of what the cabinet really does. So I would say that the best indicator that you can track is generally the relationship with the EU and confidence related to investment.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I was going to ask about the automotive industry, and I think there's one of these things that we don't cover so much is that actually in terms of industrial automotive industry, it's very much German manufacturers, BMW and others, Audi, accounting for anywhere, I think, 18 to 20% of GDP for Hungary. So as you said, how much of freedom can Hungary really realistically have here if there's such a large connection to the supply chain with Germany?
Well, there are two things taking place, right? The first one is the structural consolidation of the auto industry, where you've correctly pointed out Germany is in a really tough spot. But within that, there are cycles, and European demand seems to be more in favor of car registration right now. So Hungary will benefit from it anyway. The second major structural change is that in Europe, as you know, we are ramping up defense. And ramping up defense production also means that some idle production in cars gets redeployed into defense. Now, Hungary has not really been part of this transition because the previous administration was not really in favor of this change, was not really bidding on defense. But with the new administration, we could see that has a second wave of positive economic momentum. I mean, I remind you that Hungary has technically applied for a 17 billion euro facility with SAFE, which is the defense loan facility, and it's the only country in the EU where the loan proposal has not been agreed by the Commission yet.
An interesting one about defense. That's one that, as you mentioned, something that may develop into something more. One thing that Orbán, if we go back to all these years of Orbanomics, he was very much touting also his connection to foreign investment, very much also with China. And there's a Chinese footprint, quite a large one in Hungary. I think that's CATL battery factory, the BYD factory. So with the changes now, how is that going to impact those investments? Will this now be curtailed by China? Is this still an important place for Chinese industry? How do you see all this impact the economy there in Hungary?
I don't think that there is an immediate impact from the China side. Of course, everybody is going to be watching the administration, but Peter Magyar has not really said anything particularly negative or surprising towards Chinese investment. But his administration wants to change corporate tax pressure on the corporate sector at large. So the sectors that had a relatively low implied tax burden, like manufacturing, will see that going up. And those that had a high tax burden, like some services, will see that going down. So it's plausible that Chinese plants will face a higher tax. I don't necessarily think that's justification to exit their investment, but probably maybe not expanding it as much as they were doing it. And then there is another chapter on environmental protection, because the previous administration was very relaxed about environmental pollution, and this has created a lot of problems with the local residents, especially because climate change disruptions in Hungary have a meaningful economic impact. So it may be that over time, especially for battery production, China decides to relocate or maybe are not being as welcoming in Hungary as before. But these things, we don't fully know how the administration will really operate over the term.
Yeah. And I think right now it's also about setting a new kind of message, symbols. I mean, as we said already, trying to fight corruption, pushing against the head of the Supreme Court there as well. I mean, pretty much about all these lavish expenses. But also, how, just from your expertise as well, there is a certain type of reputation associated with Hungary. There was some direct investment, but how long will that now take to change? I mean, that kind of brand, that kind of connection, it had certain sort of labels attached to it. How attractive or unattractive is Hungary going to be now for investment in your mind?
Well, I think substance is very important when you're talking about reputation, especially when you're flipping, right? So two things will be done by the current administration. The first one is they will change the tender process, which in the past in Hungary was highly skewed to only one bidder, very high costs. So the change should bring down some of, let's call, red tape, and will benefit the reputation of Hungary as a good place to do business. Second thing, I have to stress prosecution, because the judicial system is a complex machine. In the case of Hungary, it appears to me that the biggest bottleneck is the effectiveness of prosecution rather than some missing legislation. So it will depend who the prime minister appoints, how many cases are tackled, how are they going about enforcing the law. So these things will shape whether Hungary indeed is a nice, attractive place again for FDI. The third element is, unfortunately, Hungary is at full employment. It has a scarcity of free labor. So even additional FDI would face the risk that it's not competitively priced because you have no labor, land is expensive, and you have additional red tape costs.
Just one quick one in terms of when we can check in again, when we know when is a good time of markers. Would that be another 6 months? Would that be next year? How many quarters do we need to know some kind of positive outcomes here?
I think already sometime around October you will have a good milestone because you will have seen whether indeed they have met all of the preconditions and they will put forward their first budget. So that gives you a good sense of things. Plus advancement on prosecution and tender will have moved ahead, right? So I would say first window is October, and then of course by next year you will have also an idea about the euro adoption.
All right,
so to speak.
Excellent. So giving us a list there about challenging Hungary, but that has hit the ground running, or rather the Prime Minister and his cabinet will hit the ground running. Thanks so much for that. Raffaella Tenconi there, Economist, Wood & Company. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.